It's FA Cup third round week, and we'll take a look at some of the biggest and smallest teams in the hat to pick out some value bets for you. And fresh off the back of our first pod treble win, we're back with another triple from our panel of betting experts. All that and more on today's show. Hello and welcome to the Football Betting Pod powered by Betting Expert. I'm your host, Daniel Jenkins, joined as ever by Betting Expert's football editor, Sam Ingram. How are we doing, Sam?
Hello, Dan. Yeah, all good, thanks. Much better last night after landing a pod treble. First one of the pod and first one of 2025, so that was very nice.
Yeah, yours was the last to come in. Nottingham Forest game.
I was feeling the pressure a little bit, to be honest. Yeah, I doubt I'll be picking a Monday night game to cap off the treble again, but got it over the line quite convincingly by Forest as well.
Yeah, very comfortable. Also with a leg on that treble, Scott Thornton, your over 2.5 goals, both teams to score, and over 8 corners pick for Tottenham Newcastle came in. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, it flew in. I think he was in by half time, wasn't it? The corners they finished up above 15. And I did say in the pod that I'd be tempted to go higher on the team news, and I certainly did. So yeah, it was a very straightforward one. A great game of football to watch. Not quite as many goals as you sometimes see, but it was very good.
Yeah, love that fixture. Daniele Fisichella also joining us. Another winner for you, mate.
Hello, Torino-Parma, 0-0. A weekend of 0-0s in Serie A. Verona Udinese, Lecce, Genoa, and also 1-1 with this Venezia-Napoli. But we had the Super Cup yesterday, 3-2 for Milan. So yeah, maybe we compensated for a little bit of a snooze fest during the weekend with a good game last night in Riyadh.
The girls from Italy were in Saudi this week, weren't they? So we'll touch upon that
for the joy of the Saudi aficionados who support Inter, Milan, Roma, and Lazio, Juve all together. So that's great to see. That's good.
The crowd went wild after each goal I saw.
Absolutely. They don't mind.
We will touch upon that later for some of your bets. But first off, I want to kick off with a bit of a broader discussion on the festive period. Now the dust started to settle. We've had those early New Year's games, and I think once the FA Cup third round's out the way, we sort of get back into the flow of it with the domestic action, gets a bit more used to what we were seeing before the break. So, Sam, I'll throw it to you. What do you think of the lay of the land? Looking at the top four, I think it's the most interesting discussion of things that have seen the most change over the festive period is that top four. We've seen Chelsea drop off, City kind of steady the ship a little bit, Arsenal and Liverpool start to pull away maybe from the rest of the pack. How do you see things at the moment?
Yeah, so we'll start with City. They have won their last two, drew against Everton 0-0 before that and lost to Villa just before Christmas Day. And Chelsea, they're probably the biggest losers out of the top 6, 7, 8 teams. They lost 2 and drew the other 2. The last one coming against Palace at the weekend, 1-1. So Liverpool obviously still right up there. If they win their game in hand, then they are 15 points away from Manchester City. And although City have won their last 2 games, they haven't been convincing. And if anyone's looking at their price, their outright win price and fancying a go at the 22-1, I'd maybe just say we probably shouldn't get too ahead of ourselves because they've just beaten a poor Leicester side and a poor West Ham team, and both fixtures they weren't convincing. Leicester recorded more expected goals than City in that game, and they also ended that contest with 3 big chances to City's 2. And West Ham was the same. West Ham had their chances, but in the end, City's quality in forward areas showed. Savinho was great. Erling Haaland back on the score sheet, so great for them. But yeah, like I said, 22-1 for City to win the Premier League title. It feels like a big price, and a lot of people will probably look at it and think, I'll have a 5 or I'll have a tenner on that. But I wouldn't touch them. If you look further ahead at the end of January, they've got a fixture run, which is pretty grim, and they're going to have to be flawless getting through that if they're going to win the league. So I think they're miles off it. If you quickly go through their fixtures, this is end of January, they've got PSG, Chelsea, Arsenal, Newcastle, Liverpool, Tottenham, Forest, Brighton. The latter 2, Forest and Brighton, both away as well. So that's going to be tough for them. And if City win every game now, they finish on 88 points in the Premier League. So over years gone by, maybe that would just be enough to win the Premier League. And I really doubt this version of City are going to be flawless. One to avoid for me, I think.
Yeah. The team we haven't really talked about so far, Daniele, are the ones currently sitting in third place, picked up a win last night. Story of the season, Nottingham Forest, aren't they?
Yes, and there is a top of the table clash, the next Premier League fixture. Nottingham Forest Liverpool, by the way, the only team that has beaten Liverpool so far. So Forest dreaming big and with reasons. Is a team that once they go ahead, and by the way, they've taken the lead, I think, in 15 or 16 games so far in the Premier League. They're very hard to break down, but it's also a team that is very able to go back to the basics. Defending deep, the two centre backs, Milinkovic and Murillo, are obviously complementing each other really well. I think Milenkovic has been probably one of the unsung heroes signing from Fiorentina this season. Really, really, really solid. If you look on the expected points, though, Nottingham Forest are overperforming quite a lot. They should be around 10 of 11th in the table, and the points gap with Liverpool should be 12. But of course, they won 6 in a row, and they are alongside Newcastle United the big winners of this festive season. However, strangely enough, none of these two teams are projected by Betsy, our in-house system, to finish in the top 4, whereas Chelsea and Manchester City are, with Chelsea finishing third. And I find this quite strange because Chelsea have had a poor festive season. Certainly in December you cannot win the Premier League, but you can certainly lose it. And that's what happened to Chelsea. They have lost the Premier League effectively this month. And historically, Chelsea have always had a good festive season. They were the third team in Premier League history for points gained in December. They do normally win the Boxing Day fixture, did it 13 times. This time they lost against Fulham. And I think there is no value in betting them on finishing the top 4. In Pochettino's last 20 games, remember last season they had a very strong end of the season, they collected 5 more points than in Maresca first 20 games. So they might regress to mean, and from now on, average 1.6 points per game, which will put them on 64 points, might not be enough to finish in the top 4. For City, it's a different story, by the way, because normally we know that historically they do go on a run in December. Last season, from 10 December onwards, they never lost a Premier League game. The season before, they lost just 10 points between December and May 2023. Of course, odds against for them to win the title, but what about finishing in the top 2? I think the price at the moment for Manchester City to finish in the top 2 are really, really good. Of course, Arsenal will have to suffer a crisis, but 11-2 for Manchester City to finish in the top 2, bearing in mind that by mid-February, they would have played first Chelsea at home and then Arsenal back-to-back. If Manchester City gets 4 points out of those, I think the odds are going to reduce. So if you think there's going to be a typical winter surge from Pep Guardiola, take that price now because you're never going to find it a better one unless, of course, they lose both games.
Yeah. Scott, I want to throw something to you. It's always an important part of the season, isn't it? But we haven't really seen too much change at the bottom. Wolves have stepped out a little bit. Everton are maybe sliding slightly. But I think the big interest in after this festive period in the Premier League is in that top 4, is in the title race, is in the top 6. What do you think of the lay of the land right now after the festive period?
I think Forest are definitely. I'd be happy to back them and finish in the top 4 now. I agree with Sam. I'm not convinced by City's display against West Ham. West Ham had 17 shots in the game. That's unheard of. You'd be backing usually under 7.5 for the away side of the Etihad when they're at their best. They'd have to do some serious business in January for me to even consider them gaining 20 points over the next 2 months. Newcastle are obviously in fine form. I do think they could climb into that top 4. It's an interesting one that the first time they've won 5 Premier League games in a row since Alan Pardew was in charge. That would have been the Cisse and Bar season, wouldn't it? Where they give him the 7-year contract off the back of that season, I believe.
Only expired like 6 months ago, didn't it?
Was it? I think it was 7 years.
It was about that length. Yeah,
it was a lengthy contract anyway. It feels like Alan Pardew's been off the scene for a long, long time since then. He's managed Palace since then as well. But anyway, I just don't see City charging up the table like we've seen them. As Sam said, they've got a difficult run starting the end of January, but I'd argue their next game, Brentford away, is difficult as well. They then play Ipswich. Obviously, they should beat Ipswich, but Ipswich have found a little run of form themselves. They could climb away from that relegation zone. I do think Ipswich's resurgence is part of the reason why Dyche finds himself under so much pressure now. Obviously, he could be gone by the time this goes up, to be honest. It's a tricky one. It's a tricky one. There's change all the time, certainly near the bottom within the personnel. I think West Ham and Everton will probably pull clear. So it is pretty ominous for the 3 that did go up. But you never know. Ipswich do appear to be the one that could pull away.
Yeah. Sam, looking back at the top, we had that massive game on the weekend, Liverpool versus Manchester United. It was a good game, wasn't it? Really, really good entertaining match, full of action, full of excitement, especially in that second half. Unfortunately, the bet didn't come in.
No.
It was the Salah shots came in and you backed the Liverpool win with 2 units, which is rare for you.
Yeah, it was one of my favourite bets of the season, and that Liverpool penalty to make it 2-1, obviously I knew Salah was going to step up. That was his second shot, and then he took the free kick off Trent at the edge of the box. That was his third shot, and then he got his fourth later on. But obviously, that United equaliser came, and Harry Maguire could have obviously won the game as well. So fair play to United. I suppose, like, as punters, we can only go on like what we've seen, form and what a team's showing us in recent months and under the new manager. And that performance has just been nowhere to be seen from United. So it's just one of those things. I think Liverpool are 1.22 to actually win the game. So for that to lose, I feel a bit aggrieved.
It's just one of those things, isn't it? Yeah, you're just want to bring in your profit loss for the season here at plus 6.57 ROI. Which is pretty good. Overall for the show, just a little bit down, minus 2.21 just since the start of the season. Overall, you're at plus 13.8. Overall for the show is plus 2.63. So that is excluding outright bets that haven't been settled yet. There are quite a few outrights. Jack Wright has probably got about 100 open bets from that bumper show he did at the start of the season.
Celtic, something with Celtic, I think.
There's a lot going on.
I got Napoli top 4.
Just got to say, Daniele's Napoli bet is looking like a lock, isn't it, at the moment? So
I'm not entering it in the spreadsheet yet, but
I don't have too many pod appearances to my name, so no anti-post for me. I feel quite left out now. But
there's always next season to come.
At least we have worked out that if we do want to see a title race, then we just need Sam to back Liverpool at 2 units every week for at least a month.
I do want to bring it back to the title race. So did you see some worrying signs from Liverpool? I'm just going to open this up to anyone. There's stories about Trent Alexander-Arnold going to Real Madrid, the pre-contract agreement. There's talk of a bit of a dressing room unrest, conflict, let's just say, between Virgil van Dijk and Trent Alexander-Arnold. Looked a bit feisty on the pitch and maybe apparently got a bit feisty off the pitch as well after the match. This may just be an Arsenal fan trying to stir the pot, but is there some cracks appearing in Liverpool's title race?
In terms of the performance of the weekend, I think what you've seen is, I don't think any of us would argue that Ruben Amorim is probably a very good coach. And since he's gone into Manchester United, they've had very little time on the training pitch. And you're talking they've had a week to prepare for obviously what is a massive fixture if you can't get the players up for that game. So I think you've just seen United perform. And then there's noise around Liverpool. And it's easy to point towards that. But in reality, it's just Liverpool have been slightly off where they have been, and United have stepped up to something we just didn't see. And Liverpool still got the point, and they've only lost 1 game this season. I don't really see any issues from now until the end of the season. Longer term, obviously the futures of Salah, Van Dijk, Trent still up in the air. I can see the argument there, but I still think Liverpool are in pole position, and they look really, really strong.
No, I think Liverpool have got the points they deserve in the table, by the way. I don't think they actually... And if you even look at the expected points, there's 2 points more than what should they have. Normally, champions have got many more points at the end of the season than they should have. But let's not forget, this is projected to be one of the lowest scoring in terms of points Premier League ever, probably one of the most balanced. Liverpool are still projected to win it with around 84 points, which will be mockery compared to the other season when they went head-to-head with Manchester City. So I think you could expect them to drop points here and there. But yeah, definitely still on course to win it. We 3 or 4 games to spare, probably.
I want to double down. I'm going to double down. Sam, I remember earlier in the season, I think it was the Fulham game away at Manchester City. Everyone was expecting another Manchester City game, were they? Another Manchester City season where they just steamroll it as they have done for the past 5 years. When they played Fulham at home, I think they may have won 3-2 or something, or 1-3-1. I remember Adama Traore. They did about 3 or 4 players just counter-attacking on them. Yeah, you should have had that trick. But I remember we were talking about it after the game, like there's a way to beat City here, and it's just by properly going at them. They were so open to counter-attacks. And after that game, all the analysts of all the clubs were all on their laptops looking and thinking, oh, do you know what? Maybe we can get a few chances here. And teams started attacking City. And I think in that Liverpool United game of the weekend, we saw United kind of open up Liverpool down their flanks. I think Jamie Carragher spoke about it after the game. Andy Robertson is not the player he was 3 or 4 years ago. Trent Alexander-Arnold, he's never been known for his defending, and he's got Mo Salah on the right wing who does not track back whatsoever. United forced chances from wide areas, especially down Liverpool's right, because they were so open, and they generated 1.67 XG at Anfield, highest XG Liverpool had conceded all season. If you're playing Liverpool, if you're Forest playing Liverpool next week in the Premier League, you're going to be thinking, I might target that right-hand side. I might put Alanga down there from the start and really have a go at them down the flanks, because looking at Liverpool's squad, for all their quality they've got going forward, they don't have the defensive midfield cover that they used to have from Henderson, from Fabinho, from Wijnaldum. They don't have that midfield setup to cover them in fullback areas. Is there something there?
Yeah, there is something there, because, like you said, Robertson has underwhelmed this season, and Trent had an absolute howler against United. He was at fault for one of the goals, and there were numerous instances where I was watching just thinking, like, what is he doing? He's not only out of position, but he's jogging around. He doesn't seem too bothered. And people will obviously link that to the contract situation and the noise in the media at the minute with Madrid, but I do believe that Trent has that in his game. I think he gets unfairly criticised a lot of the time in terms of his defending. I know it's not great, but it's not as bad as everyone makes out. But he does have a performance like this in him. And I just think it was one of those days. He's not going to perform like that consistently. And if he does, he can be taken out of the team. And Conor Bradley is a very, very capable and suitable replacement. So I'm not too bothered about the right-hand side of the pitch. And over on the left, Robertson hasn't been great. And what I will say is Callum Hudson-Odoi and Alanga, I think they'll be licking their lips. They will give Trent and Robertson a bit of a fright at the City ground. I think you can be sure of that. But overall, like in terms of Liverpool as a squad and Liverpool's title push, I'm not too worried about them. I think they'll be just fine.
Okay. We'll see. We'll revisit this next week, I think. I do want to move on to the FA Cup. It's FA Cup third round week. So big game in the English football calendar. A big week in the English football calendar is always one for people to look at too. Premier League's in, League One's in, Championship's in, League Two's in, everyone else is in. So Daniele, I do want to throw this over to you first. Is there a difficult? I know the bookmakers have difficulties kind of ranking these matches. It's very hard to put a Premier League club up against a League Two club. There's no previous fixtures. The data's all completely out of whack. We see some crazy high Asian handicap differences. Is there an opportunity for punters in this competition to really take advantage of some of these difficult mismatches?
There are opportunities because normally the FA Cup third round, because it comes after the festive period and the relentless calendar, is the opportunity to rest players. Also bearing in mind this week there are the 2 League Cup semi-finals, so really it never stops. However, and we know that in the FA Cup third round, by the way, there are always giant killings, there are always shocks. Last season, for example, there was Bristol City 1-1 with West Ham away, Blackpool 2-2 against Nottingham Forest. 2 years ago, Stevenage knocked out Aston Villa away from home, so there are always shocks. However, there is an important caveat. This year, for the first time in history, there are no replays in the third round of the FA Cup, which means top sides don't have a second chance. Even if they draw the first game home and away, Spurs go to Tamworth. They don't have a second chance to knock Tamworth out in the second leg at the London Stadium if they don't manage to in the first leg, and so on and so forth for every the other sides. Which means maybe they might reduce the number of changes they do. They might take the game slightly more seriously. There will be more injury. But on the other hand, there are also opportunities for bettors in the to qualify market because the game are going to be resolved at the draw. And therefore, small teams or even big teams, they can play for a draw. Ultimately, there are extra times as well. So that opens up opportunities. But in terms of where the opportunities are, you can easily pick up a couple of them. And I think Southampton game against Swansea, which we're going to talk about later, I think is the most obvious one. You look at a team that could be deemed the worst team in Premier League history. Even Derby County in 2007-2008, who finished the season with 12 points, lowest record. At this stage of the season, had 1 more point than them, 7 against 6, although they had a worse goal difference. And this is a team, is an environment that, I don't think they look forward to the game. I know even Juric never played an FA Cup tie in his life. He might want to get out of his, just finish on a high. And of course, there'll be a lot of similarities this week drawn with Wigan when they won the FA Cup and got relegated in 2013. Hull the following year almost got relegated and lost the final against Arsenal, and so on and so forth. But I think the Southampton side, it's poorer than the other two side that we mentioned, that we just mentioned. So that's probably the obvious ones. The draw, the possibility to draw in 90 minutes maybe reduces the chances of high-scoring games as well. Teams might settle for a 1-1 draw. So that's keeping in mind is nothing we have seen before, which makes the prediction even harder, I think.
Scott, over to you. Obviously, lots of... there's certainly some gulfs in class and quality in these teams. As you're looking at matches like Liverpool versus Accrington Stanley, Chelsea versus Morecambe. They've both got minus 3.25 Asian handicaps for the hosts, but also huge stylistic differences as well. Does the FA Cup third round, especially these mismatch games, does that open up opportunities for you looking at prop markets?
Yeah, of course. We get very few opportunities to back things like throws and goal kicks on these lower league teams. The playoffs and the early stages of the FA Cup are one of our only chances to do that. So it's quite interesting. So I'm looking at the throws here. The average amount of throws in the Premier League is far, far lower than the other leagues. We're talking 32.67 this season. The teams are just better on the ball. That's come down significantly within the Premier League over the last few seasons. We've used to be looking around 38 per game around 3-4 years ago. So that's quite significant. But then the Championship, the tally rises to 42.76, League 1.2, League 2, 2.3. So when these markets go up, there's a real opportunity to back overs. And it's on the televised games. There's a lot that are on TV for this round of fixtures. I think 365 will price up a decent amount. The two I'd be looking at for overs are Tamworth versus Tottenham and Millwall versus Dagenham. If those lines open anywhere, sort of low fees, high fees, you could really see 50 there, particularly Tamworth, Tottenham. Tottenham are quite gung-ho in the way they approach the game. Doesn't always mean throws in the Premier League because they are so good on the ball. But you'd think it'd just be chaotic at Tamworth. Tamworth are going to go direct, and then those direct balls into the channels inevitably mean that defenders have to head the ball out of play, and you get these flurries of throw-ins that just tip that tally up. On the flip side, Man City hosting Salford, I think that's such a mismatch, and City are home, and City are so adept on the ball. If that does open at like 35, I'd be backing the unders all the way there. So I think it does, okay, you have to use a little bit of common sense of who's just going to be played off the park, but because Tottenham are away, and you'd think the atmosphere will be fantastic, and Tamworth will get a chance to go direct, you only really need those flurries to tick it over, and Tottenham aren't as composed as City, so yeah, I'd be happy to look at those.
And Tamworth have got that long throw, haven't they? I forgot his name, the bold defender. He's got a bit of a throw in him, so you imagine if they get on the flank, they'll be looking to nick it off someone's leg for a throw. So
yes, exactly that. You'll probably see 10-minute phases where there's no throw-in, but then you'll just have those, as Tottenham obviously control phases, but then Tamworth can rack up 6 or 7 in minutes, and then that just makes anything. I'd imagine the line will open at about 41.5, and you could easily see 50 in the game, 60 even.
Yeah, certainly one to keep an eye on. The throw-in lines don't usually come out until, 24, 48 hours before the matches kick off today, Scott. And Sunday midday for Tamworth Tottenham, and then Millwall, Dagenham, Redbridge is on Monday night. I think it's 11 televised games in the FA Cup this weekend, which is...
It's a lot.
Yeah, easy.
I don't think 365 will price them all, but they should. I think they'll price those two. So, yeah, I say Millwall, Dagenham's Monday night. Surely they price the Monday night game. So
yeah, certainly one to keep an eye on. We'll dig into some of the some particular matches in a bit more detail during the bets. But just before we get to our picks for the week, let's have a quick discussion about the Bundesliga, because that is returning this week after the winter break. Daniele, we were speaking a couple of months ago. You said the title race was done.
Not really.
Scott said... No? Was it Scott said the title race was done?
I said the title race was done. Title race was done. And Daniele was less convinced. I think we were talking about Harry Kane's potential missing out on a trophy. And I was like, surely this season's the year.
That was it. All right, yeah, Daniele, a few weeks ago, Scott said the title race was done in the Bundesliga. Yeah. Why? How wrong has he been?
No, well, he's not wrong, because Bayern Munich are 4 points ahead of Bayer Leverkusen. But last season, at the exact stage of the season, it was the opposite. Bayer Leverkusen were 4 points ahead than Bayern Munich. And then, of course, they won the title. Leverkusen, by the way, they only had 2 defeats in 2 seasons. And I think now they're getting back to the best version of themselves. They had a lot of injuries this season. And by the way, 15th of February, they host Bayern, and that probably is the game that decides it all. Look, the Bundesliga confirmed is a league for goals. There have been only 6 less goals compared to last season at this stage, average 3.3, more than 3 goals per game for the 7th year in a row. But is Bayern Munich good defense what's going to settle the title? They've only conceded very few goals. I got the stats here. They conceded 13 goals. If I'm not wrong, only conceded 75 shots, by the way, which is the lowest number after 50 games since 92, 93. And I think Company has taken a different approach, especially after the 4-1 defeat at the Camp Nou. It goes less gung-ho. And, they lost to Mainz, but it's not easy in the Bundesliga. Bayern hardly go undefeated. The Company was only the 3rd Bayern Munich coach to go undefeated for 13 games. Guardiola was undefeated for 28. So the fact they lost a game, I don't think is a big shock. But yeah, we will see on 15th of February if normal service has resumed for Bayern. But I think Bayer Leverkusen are getting better and better. They had a poor start of the season, only 1 win between match day 5 and 10. I think that the league is not over at all. And probably there'll be more surprises.
Yeah, we'll see. Scott, in the next few weeks, I mean, looking back, Bayern's only real struggles have been on the road. They've dropped points away at Frankfurt, away at Dortmund, and they lost to barely touched upon the last couple of weeks. Next few games away from home in the Bundesliga for Bayern are Mönchengladbach, Freiburg, and then that Bayer Leverkusen game in the middle of February. If there is going to be a title race in the Bundesliga, does it have to start in the next month, really?
Yeah, they'd have to drop points in at least one of those games. Mönchengladbach and Freiburg are competing for you. Well, they're on the fringe of the European places at the moment, so the points are up for grabs. I think the concern for me is, as someone who completely wrote off a title race in Germany, is against Mainz, they just look so vulnerable to the counter. And Daniele's right, they're not conceding many shots at all. Mainz only had 8 shots in that game, but they created 3 big chances from 31% possession. Are they still way too open to a direct ball? Do other managers work that out in the second half of the season, like you're hoping with Liverpool? So it's I do think Bayern will get over the line. It's a big ask for Leverkusen to overturn that, but they do seem to be back to their best at the moment, and it could be a bit close for comfort. 4 points is no margin at all, really. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, as things stand, Betsy giving Bayern a 94% chance of winning the league. So, but obviously they may drop points in the next few weeks, and that number will come down quite significantly. But right, I think we're half an hour into the betting pod, and maybe we should get some tips out. So, Sam, yes, kick us off. What's your first tip?
Yeah, it's Brentford versus Plymouth Argyle in the FA Cup. I've gone for Brentford win to 0 at 2.37. So win to 0 bet in the 3rd round of the FA Cup feels like a bit of a scary proposition. Like the underdog arriving in Brentford, nothing to lose, never been to the G-Tech before. This is the first time, big day out in London. So some might turn their nose up at this, but like we've been over numerous times, this Argyle side have been horrendous away from home this season. They've conjured up over 1.0 XG in just 1 championship game out of the 14 away games they've played, and that was against Sheffield United at Bramall Lane, and I think they were only just over the 1.0 XG mark. Argyle stumped up 0 shots at Ellen Road versus Leeds, arguably the best championship team in the 2nd tier. Leeds kicked off at a 1.80 price for a win to 0 on that day, to give you a comparison to the 2.37 win to 0 we're looking at here on Brentford. Argyle are the worst away side in the 2nd tier, and if you overlook the magic of the cup stuff and sit in the camp of Argyle likely not being able to create too much of note against Brentford, then I think this is a cracking price. If you look at Argyle on the weekend against Stoke, they took a threadbare squad there due to injuries and absentees. Lewis Gibson, Argyle's best defender, was sold to Preston last week, so he was missing and obviously will be missing again here. Michael Beidou just signed from Elfsborg, and he likely should feature here. He looks quite good. He's been playing in the Europa League, and Sissoko and Whittaker are fit. So that is a concern in forward areas. Argyle do have something about them, but usually are not away from home. And yeah, FA Cup 3rd round win to 0 is not really top of my list usually, but we're governed by prices in this game, aren't we? And at 2.37, I think there's value on Brentford win to nil.
Yeah, I did some research on this game. How have these two clubs been together in the same league in the past 23 years? Like, that's crazy. It's like 2010 was the only time they've played together. Anyway, off topic. It's quite a high Asian handicap line, where when I first saw it, I was a -2 away from home for Plymouth, but then digging a little more into it, Plymouth have lost 6 of their 14 away championship matches by 3 or more goals. And we all know about Brentford here, Sam. Was there any temptation, Sam, to maybe just go straight down the Asian handicap line?
Yeah, it was a bit of a toss-up, Dan, I think, and it just came down to win to nil being more value than the Asian handicap line. I did a little bit of research around Premier League versus lower league opposition in the FA Cup third round in terms of win to nil. I looked at last year's competition. Out of the 12 matches that fit the criteria, 7 out of 12 ended to nil. Of those matches where the Premier League side was at home, 5 out of 7 ended to nil. So the strike rate was pretty high last season. The season before that, there wasn't so many games that fit the criteria of a home Premier League side. So there wasn't too much to shout about there. I think it was 1 in 3 ended up as win to nil. The main concern was that they were going to get a manager in time for the Brentford game, but I saw this morning that that's probably not likely. They also have a massive, massive game against Oxford at home on Tuesday, midweek after the weekend. I think it's Tuesday. So, yeah, the priority, of course, at the football club is to stay in the Championship. So, although this is a nice, day out for everyone, the priority is definitely Oxford at home on Tuesday. So, I just like Brentford here, and it could end up pretty ugly, to be honest.
Yeah, you going, Sam? You going to this one?
No, I'm not. Unfortunately, I would have liked to have gone to the G-Tech, but all my friends have sacked it off. So,
no.
I was going to say, hoping for a nil while being there would have been misery.
I mean, if you wanted to like a different bet, if you want to stay away from win to nil, then Brentford total goals. Like I think they're going to go quite strong here, over 2.5, over 3.5 maybe. I think Thomas Frank will go fairly strong. They'll want a cup run, so I imagine Mbeumo, Vissa, etc. I think a few of them will probably feature.
Could be quite an interesting season in the FA Cup for these mid-table teams who, relegation battle is, I don't want to say it's settled, but there are 3 or 4 teams that are significantly worse than everyone else in the league. And looking towards the top, there's not really too many opportunities for teams like Brentford, Brighton, maybe West Ham, Palace to sneak in and maybe take a European place. Are they going to be looking at the FA Cup and really sort of prioritising it and quite fancying a run? I know we'll talk about Crystal Palace later, but Sam, do you think that the lay of the land in the Premier League opens up these mid-table teams to really have a go at the FA Cup this season?
Yeah, definitely. And if, like Daniele mentioned it, we'll speak about Palace a bit more, but if you take them, for example, when they play Stockport on Sunday, that's the first game of 3 games in 6 days. So I do expect there to be rotation. I still expect strong lineups. But the thing is, right now, there's just so much money in the Premier League right now. And that's evident in the gap of quality from the top flight to the Championship. So it's obviously going to show in the FA Cup. The Premier League clubs just have a wealth of riches, and it's now much more of a squad game compared to maybe 10 or 20 years ago. So you need a capable squad to compete on all fronts. And when we see rotated squads in the 3rd, 4th round of the FA Cup, these rotated squads these rotated 11s are very good, packed with internationals, packed with the best youngsters at the club who will likely go on to be internationals, and any big names needing minutes after injury, for example. So like when Liverpool face Accrington on, I think it's Sunday as well, I'm expecting Diogo Jota, Darwin Núñez, Szoboszlai maybe because he was ill at the weekend, maybe he'll get some minutes. So these squads are just ridiculous, and Van Dijk might even play there alongside Kwanzaa, for example, Kelleher in net. So I've kind of forgot the question, but the rotated squads are ridiculous. And the kind of middling Premier League clubs. So yeah, even those, like even when they rotate with kind of a focus on pushing on in the FA Cup, the teams that these lower league opposition are coming up against, I think it's much more difficult now to beat a Premier League club than it was, even 2, 3, 4 years ago.
Yeah, certainly one to keep an eye on. Sam's first bet of the pod this week is Brentford to win to nil when they host Plymouth in the FA Cup. That's a 2.37. 1 unit on that, Sam?
Yeah.
1 unit. Right, yeah. Scott, over to you. Another bet in the FA Cup.
Yeah, so Premier League versus Championship, but I'm sure you'd be hard-pressed to find a Saints fan that think they'll stay up this season now. So it's Southampton versus Swansea. I'm going to go for under 10.5 Asian corners at 1.925. Obviously, you can take the non-Asian market as well, but the Asian one is usually priced a little bit better, and that's the case here. Just think we'll see quite a cagey game, not a great deal. Swansea aren't fantastic this year. Obviously, they're mid-table. Semi-decent run. I think they've got 7 points in the last 4, is it? So it's okay sort of form. But Swansea are patient, didn't they? From the times where they were sort of flying high, really, in the Premier League. They were always, often dubbed Swans Alona down your neck of the woods, Dan. Patient with the ball, very reluctant to sort of throw the ball forward. They average the second most possession in the Championship this season. Leeds are the only team with more, so Swansea's average is 61.5%. I think we'll just see 2 teams very comfortable on the ball again. And then unders corners just makes sense from there. Swansea match has seen the 5th fewest corners in the Championship with an average of 10.08. Southampton's matches in the Premier League are averaging over 11 corners just, but as you'd imagine, the opposition, again, a sizable amount of those, whereas you wouldn't really expect that to happen against Swansea because they're obviously the favourites. They're also not direct. Russell Martin was Russell Martin's coach Swansea, isn't he? A very patient approach with the ball. That's sort of continued under Urich. Obviously, they don't have the quality to be recording 60% possession in the Premier League, but they are averaging 53% of the ball. They had more possession than their opponents in all 3 games under Urich, so no real rush to get it forward. And then I was looking at the head-to-head data. The last time they faced off at this ground, so in the Championship last season, they were just 4 corners. And they actually met in the FA Cup in 2022, and they were just 6 corners. So under 10.5 really, really appeals, given the styles, the sort of lack of confidence, certainly at Southampton, but Swansea aren't pulling up any trees either. I think it really does look like it could be quite interesting, but drab if you're looking for shots and chances.
I fancy here Swansea on the Asian handicap as well. I fancy them on the 75 Asian handicap, which is the line. They've only lost by more than one goal margin once this season on the road, 4-0 against Portsmouth, and they won 4 games away from home. They will probably rotate, but as I mentioned before, I think Southampton, they just not in it. So yeah, if they do lose, I don't think they lose by more than 1 goal.
Yeah, I think Southampton racking up the corners would be the most dangerous thing for this bet, to be honest. So Swansea put in a good display, and even getting a result probably plays into his hands, really. It'd be nice to see a slow start. I don't see Southampton racking up the corners. Do any of you?
On that, Scott, the data for the Southampton-Brentford game, Brentford away from home this season, I think they were averaging around 10 corners conceded per 90 in the Premier League, which is ridiculous. So I was curious how that would fare go into St. Mary's against Southampton. And you're looking now, Southampton got 2 corners. I think Everton might have got 9 corners at Goodison Park against Brentford. So that just, it goes to show that Southampton might not be racking up corners. And
Yeah, exactly that.
Just to shed a bit more light on the situation at Swansea City right now, it's I'm not expecting an upset. I have to disagree with Daniele. I'm not expecting one. There is, I don't know if any of you read about this, but manager Luke Williams has been linked with the West Brom job in the past couple of weeks. And there was a story going around a couple of weeks ago about Swansea was struggling for a bit of form. And Williams came out and said that he basically didn't speak to the players before a match or at halftime. Instead, let captain Matt Grimes handle the pre-match team talk. And that turned out to be Swansea's best result of the season. I think they won 3-0 away at home to Queen's Park Rangers. And then Williams was apparently sent his agent up to West Brom to go and hold some talks over the vacant managerial spot because Corberan went to Valencia, didn't he? So they're still looking for a new manager at West Brom. As this was going on, Swansea put in their worst performance of the season, lost 4-0 at Portsmouth, absolutely dire performance. And then all of this was going on. They were playing West Brom that weekend, and there was talk that maybe Williams would be in charge of West Brom to come back when they were playing Swansea. So it's not, apparently he's staying, apparently he's not going to West Brom. It's not a settled camp. at the moment. I think it's fair to say. And I just had a look back through some of the previous data. Southampton made it past the FA Cup third round in each of the last 5 seasons. And can anyone tell me the last time Swansea beat a Premier League side in the FA Cup?
So I remember them beating Aston Villa 3-0. That must be about 5-6 years ago.
They were in the Championship. Villa were in the Championship at that point.
It would have been right on the wire.
It was when they beat David Moyes' Manchester United in 2014. It's been a while since... Wilfred Boney last minute, yeah. Michael Laudrup, Swansea. Yeah. So it's been a while since the Swans have put in a decent run in the FA Cup. So, look, they won't be batting down the door trying to rack up this corner. So I feel pretty confident about that bet, Scott. So one is under 10.5 Asian corners in Southampton versus Swansea. That's a 1.925 with 1 full unit on that. Daniele, let's change it up, get away from the FA Cup and have a look at your first tip, which is for AC Milan, fresh off the back of their win last night.
Yes, the Super Cup winners 3-2 against Inter, and they beat Juventus 3 days before. So what a debut for the new man, Sergio Conceição, beating the 2 biggest teams in Italy, and both with a comeback after going behind 1-0 against Juve, 2-0 against Inter. And the change has been clear. I mean, there is at least a change in attitude in AC Milan players. There has been more of a fight. I think Conceição, you can't say that he has really given a different dimension to Milan because he's only been in charge a week. But certainly Milan are less radical in their research of ball possession, which they were doing with Fonseca. They're playing more of a counter-attacking team, which they're more set up to do. And they got a little bit more of determination. Look, I think when they change the manager, there is always a reaction, or at least there has been a reaction in Italy with Lecce, with Genoa, with Roma. They've all changed the manager. And I think what happened is some of the players, the big players of Milan, namely Leao and Teo Hernandez, had given up on the idea of being managed by Paulo Fonseca, which probably doesn't speak very well for them. But yesterday, they were the 2 best players on the pitch. Now they take on Cagliari in Serie A. They are currently 6th, but based on our projection, they should average 1.85 points per game going forward. And I think they look a very good bet to finish in the top 4 this season, perhaps leapfrogging Juventus. Milan had lost the previous 6 derbies against Inter, but they won the one in the league back in September. And the following game, they beat Lecce 3-0 at home. Now they play Cagliari, which is a bit better compared to last season away from home. Cagliari have got 8 points in the table now away from home, which is only 3 less than they collected in the entire last season. It was basically, they got saved thanks to home form. And Milan have conceded goals. They only kept 4 clean sheets in the last 14 games. But I do think, based on our projection, I think that Milan are going to racking up the points now, and I think they're going to win more games than not in the second part of the season. Bearing in mind, they still got 2 games in hand. So for me here is a Milan win, and the goal range in the match 2-4. So Milan to win, for example, 2-1, 3-1. That pays quite well. 205 doubles your stake with 1 unit.
Yeah, looks good. I'm certainly going to be keeping a close eye on Conceição's Milan. I think it's a really interesting project and a good fit. I think we spoke about it a couple of weeks ago. Looking at the game, Betsy certainly agreeing with your bet, giving Milan 2.56 to 0.87 for Cagliari, 3.42 goal total. You touched upon it there. Are you really going to be back in AC Milan quite often in the next couple of weeks? We saw the immediate impact of Conceição in the Super Cup over those two huge wins, 2 comeback wins, as you said, and they were really good against Inter last night when they were coming back. Are you going to be getting behind Milan in the next couple of weeks?
I think I will. I think they could win many home games. That's what Conceição did at Porto. He had an extraordinary record at home, and also his team were not conceding many goals. And I think he's going to go back to the basics, really. Try to get them more settled, defend better, try to be more compact. Maybe Milan might not score many goals this time. I think between Morata and Tammy Abraham, they only got 10 goals between the 2 of them. And in fact, they've been linked with Marcus Rashford, by the way. So maybe they might be looking for something else. I think if Conceição manages to get Teo Hernandez and Leao on his side, I think this Milan team is going to win more games that they've done so far.
Yeah, Hernandez looked a threat, didn't he, against Inter? I think he set up the second goal, scored the first one.
Scored the first one, yeah.
Yeah, looked good. Yeah. Certainly one to keep an eye on. Daniele's first bet, AC Milan to win, and a goal range of 2-4 in the match when they take on Cagliari. in Serie A. That's a 2.05, 1 full unit on that. Sam, over to you. Back to another mid-Premier League club in action in the FA Cup as Crystal Palace hosts Stockport.
Yeah, Crystal Palace minus 1.5 Asian handicap. That's at 1.88 versus Stockport. So initially, my first reaction was that this line feels a little bit short. So we've got a Premier League side here working their way into form in the top flight, playing quite well, picking up draws versus Chelsea and Manchester City recently. And over in Stockport, Isaac Alafe, Fraser Horsfall, they came off the pitch recently against Rotherham, as did Louis Barry, who has since been recalled to Aston Villa with the aim of getting him through the door of a championship club. So he was Stockport's leading man, really, their biggest kind of creative spark and creative outlet. He is very good enough that without him this season, for the back end of this season, I think Stockport will struggle without him when he's not been in the side. They often look lacking in terms of creativity, as you'd expect, because a player that good in League One, he's going to have a big impact on that squad. So I think across the rest of the season, they might struggle at times, and it's almost an impossible task to replace someone like that at the level, unless you're going to spend like £15+ million on a player like Birmingham City. So for a club like Stockport, that's just not going to happen. They're a good side, they're an ambitious club, but Barry leaving is a hammer blow. And also Lewis Bate picked up a knock on Boxing Day, and I'm not 100% sure on the availability of the Stockport squad for the trip to London, because we're getting this podcast out quite early and we've not got pre-match press conferences and etc. to work with. So I'm not too sure, but they will have key players missing, and Barry especially. For the home team, Crystal Palace, they will rest and rotate. This is, like we said earlier, their first of 3 games in 6 days, which is a little bit of a worry when looking to overcome a handicap, especially because Stockport, I think they may have like a week to prepare after this for their next League One game. So that's a little bit of a worry. But the players that Palace can bring in and rotate include Eddie Nketiah, who hasn't hit the ground running at Palace, and he's probably got a point to prove. Czech Decore might get some minutes from the start as he continues to work his way back from injury. Chris Richards at the back. Will Hughes missed the Chelsea game. He's been brilliant this season, so he might come back in here. Chadi Riyad might get a run out. Was signed for 20 million from Real Betis in the summer. Picked up an injury and might be involved here. There's a lot of talent that should start for Crystal Palace alongside some familiar faces. And if you look at the EFL Cup, Oliver Glasner went full strength there against Arsenal most recently. And although we're expecting some rotation, I imagine he's going to aim to go on another little cup run, because the start of the season that they had was obviously really not very good. So that means that European football realistically is out of reach for Palace, and a mid-table finish is the likeliest finish they can expect. So yeah, why not go on a cup run in the FA Cup? And I think in terms of Stockport coming to Selhurst Park with their absentees, I think they're going to put them to the sword. And I was a bit surprised this wasn't maybe a minus 1.75 or -2 like some of the other games in the FA Cup this weekend.
Certainly agree with that. This line, and I think the Bournemouth line, they're playing West Brom, aren't they? That's -1.25. It stood out to me a little bit as a quite short. It could be longer. Yeah, no, it does come back to what we were talking about earlier with Palace just kind of quite settled, not in any real danger of going down, not in any real hope of making a European place. They've gone out of the third round of the FA Cup twice in a row in the last 2 seasons. Big opportunity for them to really stake a claim, have a bit of a cup run. You said they went full strength in the EFL Cup earlier in the season, so it looks really good. They'd like a cup run, wouldn't they?
Yeah, most definitely. You'd imagine that this is one of their priorities. Even before the season started, I'd imagine the FA Cup, alongside the EFL Cup, they were the 2 areas that Glasner would have been tasked to put together a little run. And I've got a bit more information on the other handicaps in this round. So if we look at Brentford versus Championship opposition, they're -2. Fulham versus Championship opposition, -1.5. Leeds versus League 2 opposition, -2.75. Ipswich versus League 1 opposition, 1.75. Newcastle versus League 2 Bromley, -2.25. So Crystal Palace at home versus League 1 opposition at -1.5 Asian handicap. at a good price at 1.88. I just feel like it's a touch bigger and that there is value in that line. So I'm going to have to take it. I think that for me was the standout line of all the Premier League teams. You mentioned Bournemouth 1.25. That's good as well. But obviously West Brom, they're quite a handy championship outfit. Stockport, league below, just come up from League Two. Then they're punching above their weight. I think they're maybe 6th or 7th in League One. Like I said, ambitious club, but they are punching above their weight. So to get a Premier League club at home against a League One team, without a few of their key players, it was a go-to in the third round for me.
Yeah, certainly does stand out as well. You mentioned Eddie Nketiah there. He's certainly got a point to prove. He's 2.10 to score any time, which I think looks pretty good as well. Sam's second bet of the show is Crystal Palace minus 1.5 in Asian handicap market versus Stockport in the FA Cup. That's a 1.88. Another full unit on that,
please.
Fantastic. Daniele, over to you for your second bet from Serie A before Scots.
So it's Bologna-Roma. In this case, I'm going to go for Roma draw and the goal range in the match 2-4, which brings it up to 225, 1 unit. So is a bet builder. In the derby, the 15 points difference between Lazio and Roma were not felt. Roma were the better side. They hit Lazio perhaps with the same weapons that Lazio uses, the counter-attack, but they were very, very clinical. And Ranieri has demonstrated to be, once again, a great man management. You know, the first goal was scored by Lorenzo Pellegrini, the club captain, who was undergoing a difficult period. But Ranieri trusted him, put him on the pitch, and he scored the first goal. And then the second one from Alexis Saelemaekers, which is probably the unsung hero of Roma at the moment, signed in the summer to give them a little bit of width on the right-hand side. As soon as came back from the injury, I think Roma are much more balanced. What Ranieri has done, he has put the players in the right position, back three with Hummels in the middle, trusting him to command the defense, Leandro Paredes in the middle of the midfield, two very experienced players, and then a bit of width, as I said, with Saelemaekers, Angelino on the other hand, and Dybala at the center of the project. If he's fit, if he stays well, Dybala still is the top 3, top 2 best player in Serie A, I think, for sure. So Roma are definitely lucky to have him. But Roma are not set up to just sit back and defend. They are a team that goes for it. They are a team that also concede a few chances. Yeah, I think the new manager Bounce, he's working for them as well. They had a very good December. They won every single home game they played. From now on, we project them to finish 9th, but picking up 1.52 points per game. So an improvement on the current average 1.2. I think overall they got a better squad than Bologna, who not only lost Calafiori, Zirkzee, but also Saelemaekers from last season. The goal line is set by Betsy at 247. That's why I go for the goal range 2-4. But yeah, I don't think Roma are going to get beaten on this one.
I'm glad you got the draw on side as well, because they're really struggling away from home, aren't they, Roma?
Yes.
They're scoring quite a lot at home. They're scoring quite a lot in front of their own fans, but on the road, they are really struggling to score and pick up wins. They haven't won a competitive game away from home all season.
Yeah, that's true. But I think historically, Roma, also under De Rossi and under Mourinho, were much better at home at the Olimpico. And this is something they need to address. But, you know, the first part of the season, the results were skewed by the managerial changes and the setup didn't quite work with Juric. But, you know, I think against Spurs in that 2-2 draw, not too far ago, they were probably the better team and they had the better chances. And you could start things coming together for them. As I said, might not be necessarily a win. Probably, if you look at the Betsy projection, this is the game with the highest percentage of a draw, or the second highest in the match day. So it's good to get the draw on side. Really, the book is set the Asian line at 0 for both Roma and Bologna. Maybe it's not the option, because I guess if it's a draw, you get your money back. But I think Roma are good value at the moment. I think probably are one of the teams that are going to pick up more points in the second part of the season. So I think it's good to get them on side.
Yeah, looks good. Second bet we've seen from you this week with that. So what's the thinking behind that? It's not something you've done too often this season.
No, I think it's a good way to boost the odds, really. The goal range 2-4 takes into account that Serie A has been changing over the years. It's not that cagey anymore. But again, it doesn't necessarily commit you to an over 2.5 goals. I think having the goal range for a game with 4 goals is a high scoring game. Even with 3 goals is a high scoring game. So if you get the 4 on your side, but again, you're not committed to the over 2.5 goals, I think that's how you can easily boost the odds over 2. So I think that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, looking good. Daniele's second bet is Roma or draw when they take on Bologna, and 2 to 4 goals for a goal range bet when they play in the Serie A this weekend. That's at 2.25, 1 full unit on that. And Scott, close us off for the singles, please. Your second bet, looking at Atletico Madrid versus Osasuna.
So we looked into this trend across Europe a few weeks ago, and the data was even more surprising than what I just remembered. Atletico Madrid are scoring a lot of late goals, like a hell of a lot of late goals. So we'll break down some of those numbers. Atletico Madrid versus Osasuna, a late goal, 365 alter the line to suit the game here. So they've selected a goal after the 6th minute. Sometimes it goes up to 78. I think the last 15 minutes of normal time plus injury time is a really nice amount of time to see a late goal here. So Atletico obviously spent big in the summer. They really look to bolster their attack, but they really haven't found the perfect way of playing Soloff, Alvarez and Griezmann yet. So you quite often see one of them on the bench. And the perfect example of the way to use that was the win at the Nou Camp before the winter break, with Soloff obviously came off the bench, scored the winner in the 96th minute. He hasn't quite hit it off for Atletico Madrid yet, but he's a lethal scorer, and those points there, that could be the difference in the title race. So they really wouldn't begrudge a slow start. I just think they've got a lot of attacking options, and then when you delve into the numbers, they score a hell of a lot of goals. They're averaging 0.83 goals per game in the 76th minute and beyond. So by comparison, the most in the Premier League is 0.6 in that period. I believe it's Bournemouth, who've scored 0.6 in the last 15 minutes plus stoppage time, the most in the Premier League. So 0.23 more for Atletico Madrid. 42% of their goals have been scored in the last 15 minutes plus stoppage time, which is an incredible amount. Simeone's side have scored 6 goals in this period in the last 5 league outings. And obviously with this bet as well, we get the unlikely scenario of an Osasuna goal on side too. I think that Atletico will be full of confidence. They had a narrow win in the Copa del Rey, but it's really all about the league. They've got good squad depth. I don't see them tiring the options off the bench, to say whoever he decides to play. There's definitely some quality coming on. There's goals throughout the team, really. Gallagher's slowed down a little bit, but certainly capable of chipping in. The likes of DePaul and Lenormand, they're all capable of snatching goals, whether it be from set pieces. I just think Atletico can grab another late goal here. Obviously, it would be nice to back Atletico in that period, but they're not offering the market at the moment. But even still, at 1.83, I'd be happy to back it. And we get the added bonus of if Osasuna were to score in that period too.
I like it, because I think the only risk with this one, Scott, might be that if Atletico run riot after 50 minutes and they are 3-0 up, it's unlikely to score late goals, because most of those goals that you mentioned have been winners. However, if you look at Osasuna and what they've done so far this season, only twice this season in the league, the game was done and dusted after 60 minutes when they lost 4-0 to Girona and 4-0 to Real Madrid. All the other games, they always been in the game until the very last minute, either with a draw, a win. They conceded a last minute goals against Rayo Vallecano when they lost 3-1. So Osasuna is a team that can stay in the game until the very end, which makes the idea of Atletico Madrid again getting a late winner or a late equalizer even more likely. So.
Yeah, definitely. I don't see them being out of sight. I'm really hot on Atletico at the moment. I do think they're probably the best value for the betting in Spain on the title race, because they're third favourite still. I just see them having more of a chance than Barcelona. Obviously, Real probably do deserve to be the strong favourites, but if you're looking from a betting standpoint, I quite like Atletico. But I was looking through the example games. As I said, they've scored 6 in their last 5 in that period of time. But they led Las Palmas 1-0, and Soloff didn't start that game, scores off the bench again. So I think just having players with a point to prove means that even if Atletico do have the lead, when the likes of Soloff or it could be Alvarez come on, they really do look to put a shift in, because that's such a competitive starting 11 to get into at the moment.
I think the biggest concern that we've overlooked is that Atleti had Marbella away in the Copa del Rey. So like
maybe
a few sore heads. They've only had a week to get over it as well. So
yeah, it's a bit short
We'll
to
see.
week in Marbella, sure.
Yeah.
I think Simeone might have been the worst of the lot.
Yeah, can't begrudge them. 13 straight wins in all competitions for Atletico. They're going well at the moment, aren't they?
That is the joint longest in the club's history. The other was 2012, also under Simeone. They didn't win the league that season. They won it the season after. But yeah, incredible run. And Simeone been there for that long. I know he'd been there for a hell of a long time, but it just, the years seem to have flown by, and there he still is.
Yeah, still going strong and nursing a hangover. Sam's reports are to be believed. Cart's second bet is a late goal after 74.59 in Atletico Madrid versus Osasuna. That's at 1.83 on Bet365. There's a full unit on there as well. Let's close it off with the pod treble. We had our first win of the pod treble last week. Congratulations, gentlemen. Sam, kick us off with the first leg of this week's pod treble.
Liverpool win 2-0 and to win the first half versus Accrington, that's at 1.72. So said earlier, Arne Slot will likely be rotating here. It's hard to map out exactly who will feature and how many minutes they'll get as Liverpool play Tottenham on Wednesday night, and the individual output from those players will then in turn, you'd imagine, decide their starting 11 to face Accrington in the FA Cup at the weekend. What I'd expect: Kelleher, Conor Bradley, Kwanzaa, Harvey Elliott, Diogo Jota, Darwin Núñez. Probably wrong on a couple of them, but that's probably what it's strong. It's probably what I'd expect to see against Accrington of League Two, of course. So I think whatever happens, the Accrington playing staff will have a really, really tough day out at Anfield. They are 19th in League Two. The 24 goals conceded away from home in League Two is the most away from home in that division. They're averaging 0.75 goals conceded in the first half per 90 this season in League Two. And it's fair to say that against Liverpool at Anfield, there should be 2 or 3 high-quality chances in the opening 45 minutes, maybe more. And we just need Liverpool to finish them off in the first 45. In the Premier League, Liverpool have conceded 8 goals in 10 home games, keeping a clean sheet in 4 of 10 matches. So Liverpool to win 0 and to win the first half at 1.72 against League Two opposition.
So many Liverpool fans wearing a Liverpool shirt, they'll say the famous line Accrington Stanley, who are they?
Sam not going for the late kickoff again. For straight down
Not
the middle.
again.
Yeah, didn't want to
Too much
that.
pressure.
Did he mention last week's one? Did he mention it once? So
yeah, it's fine. All's good. Person who's gone for the early one is Scott. Give us your leg for the treble.
forgot it was on early until after I wrote it. But yeah, I went for the early one last week and that one. So yeah, all good. Fulham versus Watford, and we're backing both teams to score. Fulham are a team that do have hope of Europe. Really, they can snatch a European place in the Premier League. It takes some very good form, but it's doable. I can see them rotating, but that's not the be all and end all for this bet. Clean sheets have been hard to come by for Fulham of late. Both teams have scored 8 of their last 9 with an average of over 3 goals per game. Watford matches are also very goal-friendly, the 6th most goals in the Championship, and both teams have scored landed in Watford's last 7. So I really do think we'll see both teams offer quite a lot going forward here. It was a while ago when these teams last went head-to-head, but I always like to reference it. But the bet did win as the teams drew 1-1 at their last meeting at Craven Cottage. I think the last meeting overall was 2019, and that was Watford at home on that day, and they won 4-1, I believe. So both teams to score landed in both of those. Just think Watford will give it a good go.
Yeah, certainly that's there for the take. In Fulham, see lots of goals at both ends, so fingers crossed for that one. It's the longest odds of the treble. Daniele, close it off with your pick.
With the man that has been very much in the news this week and maybe for the last year, Jack Grealish hasn't scored a goal for Manchester City since 16 December 2023. Pep has said that he needs to step up. The headlines this week: he's finished, his career is over. I'm going to pick him to score or assist at home against League 2, League 1, Salford City. And that pays, League 2, Salford City. And that pays 163 this time around. So for Jack Grealish to score or assist against Salford City, he gave an assist this season in the League Cup against Watford at home, which makes me think he will start the game. 2 seasons ago in the FA Cup, when they won the treble, he gave 3 assists. Salford City have kept 7 clean sheets in the last 8, and they got the League 2 best defense with 19 goals. They are third in the table. I think they're going to rotate because there's no chance they're going to go there with the best squad when they can push for promotion into League 1. If there is a penalty, I think Jack Grealish takes it just to get the monkey off his back. I think, Jack Grealish to score an assist at home against League 2 Salford City is almost a safe bet.
I've noticed that Daniele changed his pod treble pick late doors.
Yes.
What he's saying now wasn't what was on the sheet.
No,
so
it wasn't.
It was, I think it was goals in Norwich Brighton. So if
Yeah,
that
it
lands
was
and
it was goals.
Grealish doesn't, then Daniele could be in big trouble.
If Man City had played Marbella away last weekend, I would not be back in this Jack Grealish bet.
Jack Grealish would not make it back in time. Yeah, they've got a lot of fixtures to come. Manchester City, haven't they? And as Sam said earlier, a lot of big, tough matches. So, might be a good time to get some confidence in those boots. Let's recap the bets for this week. Sam, give us your 2 trebles. Your 2 singles, sorry.
2 singles. I've gone for Brentford win to 0 against Plymouth Argyle at 2.37 and also Crystal Palace minus 1.5 Asian handicap at 1.88 versus Stockport.
Okay. Are you tracking your pod treble entry as a single, as you sometimes do?
Yes, please.
You will. Go on. Okay, go on. Do you want to announce that as well?
That is Liverpool win to 0 and Liverpool win the first half versus Accrington at 1.72.
Cool. And Scott?
First up, it's Southampton versus Swansea, under 10.5 Asian corners at 1.925. And then Atletico Madrid versus Osasuna, a late goal, which is after 74.59 on Bet365 at 1.83. Both bets for a unit. And just because I'm a creature of habit, I won't track the treble we won last week, and I didn't track it as a single. So let's get another treble winner.
It's fun. It's fun. Daniele Fisichella?
Milan to beat Cagliari and goals range in the match 2-4 at 2.05. And then Bologna-Roma. Roma or draw. And again, goals range in that match 2-4, which pays 2.25.
Stuff. And this week's pod's treble. Sam's entry is, as he said, Liverpool to win to 0 and to win the first half versus Accrington Stanley. Scott Thornton's entry is both teams to score in Fulham versus Watford. And Daniele Fisichella's is Jack Grealish to score or assist versus Salford City. Put all 3 of those together into a treble, you get odds of 5.44, which we'll be tracking for a quarter of a unit. If you are going to be using any of the bets on today's show, then please gamble responsibly, only betting what you can afford to lose. Thank you very much to Sam Ingram.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to Daniele Fisichella.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott Thornton.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for me. We'll be back next week.